Brexit is the most radical change of direction for this country. The idea that any bureaucrat could be in favour of radical change is a nonsense.
The civil service may well have its own agenda, but ultimately, with a strong government, it should be the government's will that the civil service implements.
I don't think that watching him with 3 prime ministers, there'd ever be a moment that he would be in any way patronising about the fact that he has more information at his fingertips.
He's one of the tallest men in the British establishment, with one of the lowest profiles, yet he wields some of the greatest powers. He's never at the centre of attention, but he's always in the room by the Prime Minister's side. Olly Robbins, Theresa May's chief advisor on Europe, is being dubbed the real Brexit secretary, possibly eclipsing David Davis. Beyond the world of Whitehall, most people have no idea who Olly Robbins is. But day by day, he is shaping the nature of Britain's departure from the European Union. He has the Prime Minister's ear in Downing Street, and he's in the engine room for the nitty-gritty of the Brexit negotiations in Brussels.
Well, every European Prime Minister or President has an Olly Robbins, has someone who works closely with them, whom they trust, who is in permanent contact with all the others. These are people who telephone each other, email each other, text each other. The actual formal meeting where we all see people sitting around a table for a split second, that's the tip of the iceberg.
A recent advisor to Theresa May says Olly Robbins has a knack of winning the confidence of prime ministers and senior mandarins.
Olly was somebody who really had the full trust of that team, had the full trust of the Prime Minister, had the full trust of Jeremy Hayward as well, and was able to really sort of own meetings and run meetings in a way that made the process very smooth and very effective. And probably one of just a few officials who actually sort of had that level of trust and access, I think.
So what are the instincts of the man shepherding us through this defining moment in British history? A good starting point is the place where his worldview began to take shape. Olly Robbins embarked on the first steps of what must have looked like a classic journey through the establishment when he studied politics, philosophy and economics here at Oxford in the 1990s. But there's a twist. He chose Hertford College, which, despite the wooden panelling, has pioneered a much more inclusive admissions policy. An Oxford contemporary, who later worked with Olly Robbins in Downing Street, had an inkling he would go far.
Even at university, it was already clear that this was a guy who was going to make a success of whatever he did. I think it's fair to say he's the sort of person you'd be more likely to see in tweed than in a football kit. But that phenomenal brain was very much there, but also that sense of humour.
The intellectual clout of this modern college in an ancient setting was shown when Olly Robbins and 3 other graduates of Hertford controlled intelligence at the heart of Whitehall. The Hertford gang say it was a conspiracy that never existed. I've spoken to one Tory Brexiteer who went to a grander Oxford college and is wary of Olly Robbins. They're all commie geographers, this Tory told me, of the Hertford College alumni. Brexiteers were delighted when it emerged that at Oxford, the young Olly Robbins had written that the Soviet Union wasn't all bad. I understand that David Davis, the actual Brexit secretary, who has something of a prickly relationship with Olly Robbins, has a habit of opening meetings with him by welcoming colleagues to the Olly Robbins People's Soviet. Everyone reportedly has a chuckle, but some Leave ministers are suspicious of him and regard him as a classic civil servant who sees Brexit as a crisis to be managed rather than an opportunity to be seized.
I was, as you know, a member of the Thatcher government. We came in and introduced a radical change in economic policy, and all the officials were aghast. They thought it would be a disaster, but we had at that time a strong cabinet led by an outstanding Prime Minister, and they accepted the leadership, the political leadership, as is their constitutional duty.
If a soft Brexit is being negotiated, it must be the will of the Prime Minister and her Cabinet. How can we possibly be in a position where the Cabinet and the Prime Minister has a certain direction, but the civil service is taking it a different way? That surely is a sign of a weak government.
Olly Robbins fears that the Cabinet Brexiteers, notably Michael Gove and Boris Johnson, are on his case. He worked hard to win them over in the run-up to the Prime Minister's EU speech in Florence last September, making changes on the way. But in the tense week in December, when the Phase 1 Brexit negotiation deal appeared to be on the verge of collapse, there was some frustration in the Cabinet Office that those ministers were less supportive.
Well, I think inevitably because of the role that Boris and Michael played during the Leave campaign, clearly they are big figures who need to be part of this process and brought into it. And from what I've seen, I think Olly deals with them and their offices very effectively, and again brings a level of diplomacy to the whole thing.
Deep in the basement of the Guardian newspaper lies one final clue to the character of Olly Robbins: ruthlessness tinged with impeccable manners. Angle grinders and drills were wielded by senior Guardian editors to destroy files which had been leaked to them by Edward Snowden. Olly Robbins had issued a stern warning to the Guardian that its continued possession of the files marked a threat to national security. He brokered a deal where the files were sawn to bits in an operation supervised by government agents. Punctiliously polite was the Guardian verdict on their Whitehall adversary. So a consummate Whitehall operator with experience in the smoke and mirrors world of intelligence is guiding the Brexit process. But in his mind, the painful business of cutting deals and making compromises lies in the hands of his political controller.